As the US election draws ever closer, in fact 30 days to go now, can you believe it? There's no shortage of news from the campaign trail. Donald Trump returned to the Pennsylvania fairground where he was shot back in July, joined on stage by a hyperactive Elon Musk. We'll talk about that in a second. Melania Trump is releasing her memoir, and early polling, wait for it, shows there's no clear winner. For more, we're joined by American and Oz Sarah James. Sarah, good morning. Let's talk about this rally. Donald Trump made a point of going back to the fairground, Butler, Pennsylvania, the subject of his first assassination attempt back in July.
Exactly. I mean, we'll be talking a little bit about October surprises this morning, and some of those October surprises didn't happen in October. An October surprise is anything that kind of moves the needle on an election, something that we didn't expect, and certainly I think the first one of this election cycle was Biden's debate performance that changed the ticket, and another huge one was the assassination attempt. So he's going back, kind of trying to recreate that momentum. We all remember him with his fist in the air, and that was a moment when it looked like it was absolutely certain that he would win the White House. He still wants to win it, so he's going back to rekindle that flame.
And he and Kamala Harris really needs Pennsylvania to get into the White House. It is, of all the swing states, the key swing state.
The keystone key state. That's exactly right. There's no question Pennsylvania is where all the attention is, which is, of course, again, why his rally was there. Kamala Harris, meantime, is looking at another swing state, which hasn't really been in play that much in recent years, but that's North Carolina. With Hurricane Helene having struck that state and with such devastation, she went down to the state to get an opportunity to see the devastation and show what the administration is doing, even as another hurricane is predicted to land in a couple of days.
Yeah, that's terrible. I've just been reading about people who just felt they were completely stranded and had to rely on neighbours to come and get them, and we're hearing this more and more. With Kamala Harris, it's been interesting the kind of types of interviews she's been choosing to do. She's doing a few podcasts as well, Sarah.
Yeah, this is like the way it is now, right? So she'll be doing 60 Minutes, well, that's very traditional, and call her daddy. Less so. Alex Cooper, the #1 female podcaster in America. She has a $60 million deal with Spotify, but actually that wasn't enough, so she's now switching over to Sirius for even more. But the bottom line is Kamala Harris is going to be getting on to Alex Cooper's show to talk about reproductive rights, and that's a friendly audience for her, she believes, but more importantly, an audience to reach younger voters and viewers. So really we're seeing this across the spectrum. It's a completely different way of trying to reach the audience this time.
Indeed, upending traditional media advertising models. But Kamala Harris is getting criticism, including from within Democratic ranks, for not going to unsafe spaces, for not subjecting herself to tougher interviews outside these friendly podcasts. She did an MSNBC interview, which was on all counts very soft recently. Can she get away with doing this 4 weeks to go?
I think it's probably as much about doing interviews. I'd say even more so, it's about actually doing rallies and big events and meeting people. To be the other kind of criticism is stop going to fundraisers and go out and meet with the voters. At this stage, this close to the election, with it this tight, that actually I think matters even more than interviews. And the reason is because major news events still have the opportunity to move the needle. And to that we go to the Mideast. What's happening in the Mideast right now, we've been talking all morning on the show about October 7th, that is an ongoing conflagration that's both a humanitarian crisis and it is a problem for her campaign. And the reality is she's got to figure out a way to put daylight between herself and the president for some voters in places like Michigan, where there's a large Arab American population, and that's going to be a trick that she has to do.
Yeah, well said. That will be really fascinating. At the moment, Sarah, polls still just too close. Too close.
Yeah, polls are too close to call, and what everybody is looking for is, will there be, we started the conversation with this, an October surprise? And just in a little trip down memory lane, I want to roll back the clock to 1979, 1980, and the origins of that expression, October surprise. Again, the Mideast, central in a presidential campaign, then between President Carter and this governor from California by the name of Reagan.
Yeah.
And of course, it was the inability of President Carter to get home the hostages. People tied yellow ribbons around their trees. I remember this vividly, to try to get the hostages home. And that crisis, there you have a video. We're on film back in the day. It looks so different. But there were these yellow ribbons that people tied because the hostages had not been released. And indeed, just last week, President Biden said in a news conference, asked whether or not the Prime Minister of Israel is waiting on a deal. He said whether he is going to influence the election, I don't know. So again, all these years later, we have the Mideast in the frame. We have that being a central issue in the campaign now, as it was more than 40 years ago.
30 days to go.
And counting.
And counting.
Yes.
Wow, yeah, it's too close to call. And it's fair to say it is the closest presidential election campaign you've covered a lot as well in generations.
It is. There's no question about it. There hasn't been one that's been this close down to the wire. We've watched the momentum be with Trump again in Butler, Pennsylvania. He had the momentum.
Yeah.
Then it shifted to Harris. Who's going to have the momentum going into the final days? It looks like it's going to be an absolute fight to the finish, and it's going to come down to our favorite words on this show, that old electoral college.
That old electoral college, yes. Yeah.
270 to win.
Weird and wacky electoral college, but that's the way they do things over there. Sarah, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We'll be talking to you a lot in the next 30 days. Great to see you.